We got one more guest, one more segment here for this January 10th edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is with Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook, for this week's version of the Odds Report. Brent, how's it going today, man?
Going wonderfully well. I mean, looking forward to the big college football game on Monday that kind of everyone will be watching, and I mean, everyone's going to be betting as well. I mean, that's one of the most overwhelming games we have. I mean, it kind of exceeds NFL playoff action, being the only game going. So we're gonna have fantastic volume on that game, and it's interesting looking ahead to that. It's one of those games where the sharp action really stays the same. I mean, sharps don't play a game just because it's on TV or just because it's a national championship game or whatever, but the public volume can be, just massive. So always look forward to that. Helps us in terms of our risk management of those games. And of course, we got the NFL playoffs getting us closer to the San Francisco 49ers being crowned champions.
Oh, okay. There's an interesting call. We'll get to that here in a couple of minutes when we get over to the NFL side of things. But, we are recording this on Thursday evening. Props not yet posted over at DSI. In fact, I don't really see them anywhere in the offshore market yet as we're recording here. They should start to pop up on Friday or on into Saturday. So unfortunately, we don't have those to talk about. We did touch on them a little bit last week. We'll touch on them briefly here in a couple of minutes. But before we get into the Clemson versus LSU game, I asked you about this before we started recording here. James Madison and North Dakota State on Saturday. It is the FCS National Championship game. Are you going to get any kind of significant handle for this?
This is my pause for effect. No, not really. No, I mean we'll get okay action on it, but not it's not a big volume game, and most of the action that we do get will come on the day of the game. If there was any value from sharps to be found on this, it would have been hit already. Talking weather might be a factor on this game, and this total has dropped down. I see the highest opening number was 52.5, and it's down to about 48.5 now. But nothing, in-house, nothing sharp on that side in terms of the spreads, basically just popping back and forth between, James Madison -1 to North Dakota State -1 to a pick 'em where we are right now.
All right, so we go to Monday night then here. Clemson and LSU. LSU still painted 5.5 across most of the offshore market. A lot of sixes out at the brick and mortars in Vegas. What do you guys got going on? What number are you at, and any updates on the action?
Not really, to be honest with you. I mean, you talked last week, I believe it was 5.5 or 5.5 -15. I think last week when we talked, I was 5.5 -15. One of the books out there, respectable book, who takes, good, heavy, sharp action as well, was sitting at -5, -15. 5.5, it's not like we're talking about key numbers here in college football. So I'm still 5.5 -15. Those books that were 5 are now 5.5 -15. So it's pretty much painting that way across the board. As you said, there are some sixes out there elsewhere. Total as well. I mean, we open in house at 69.5. I'm still sitting at 69.5 now. I do have a wager count about 2-1 towards the over. Just slightly higher than that. My wager count, I think when we talked last week, was about 3.5-1 favoring LSU, and it's still over 3-1 favoring LSU. So just, from in-house, what I see is just public money going that way. When we were at -5, the count was about 3-1 LSU. Sitting at 5.5, it's still 3-1 favoring LSU. So the 5 to 5.5 really hasn't done anything. And, we talked about before how, when the whole bowl season started, how, handicapping these games is just like a completely different animal. During the regular season, handicapping college football games, you're talking about your conference stats, really influence your handicapping. Now it's these obviously conference stats get thrown out the window. You're talking about a run heavy conference versus a pass heavy conference, and how your numbers all get screwed defensively and stuff like that. A Pac-12 versus a Big Ten or what have you. So the numbers really get thrown out the door. You're talking about long layoffs as well, different preparation schedules. So these are really unique to any other college football game. And it's to be honest with you, it's kind of difficult in terms of looking at you're talking about handicapping non-conference matchups now. And it is really a bit of a difficult task at hand. And looking at the number, how it's open at 5.5 here, and we're still at 5.5, and open 69.5 and still there, I'd say at least we got the right number in terms of balancing our action. I could see myself, based on the current action, creeping towards 6. Haven't gone there yet, just to see what the market goes.
Well, and I mean, do you sort of get the feeling that maybe sharp money just kind of waiting on Clemson to maybe pick off one of those stray sixes if it comes out there?
It could be, but I don't know. I mean, there are sixes out there, and you figure, yeah, like as you said, the brick and mortars, maybe if they took a hit, they probably would just held the number anyway, based on the volume they'll get this weekend on that game. So, I really don't know if is six the number where they come back? Is it 6.5? Right now, like I said, I do have a wager count about 3-1 favoring LSU. If we have to, sit where we are, we'll be okay. If the market goes up to 6, obviously going to go with them. If the market goes back down, I'll probably still hold my 5.5 position simply because I'm still getting 3 times more bets on LSU at that price.
Well, and again, obviously for our listeners here, we are several days in advance of this game and several $100,000 in advance of this game. But if this line does come down to something like 5, would it be an indication of Clemson sharp money?
Yeah, I think, I feel safe to say that. I just don't see, the public has definitely tipped their hand in terms of where they're going. Like I said, even at 5 and 5.5, it's still a solid 3-1 count favoring LSU. So I think that's going to hold true. I've seen a few buy points back and forth and sell points back and forth where even at 6, the count slightly favors LSU, but it's kind of balanced out there. So that seems to be my early look that 6 might be the number if I'm looking at the balanced action. But again, we've still got a ways to go in terms of this game. A lot of action coming in on the weekend. Of course, the day of game is just going to be crazy volume.
Well, and of course, all that prop money that's going to come in as well. And something that I guess we can kind of talk about here a little bit from, to having talked about this with the Super Bowl, last year's national championship game, stuff like that. A lot of times sharp bettors are looking for unders and, of course, public bettors looking for overs. So, maybe that kind of factors into this weekend and some of the activity that we see out there in the markets.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a factor. And again, it's just, a general tendency too for sharp guys to look for value on the under. And again, we talked about before how, betting unders is kind of like, wishing for something exciting to not happen in terms of, hey, let's not have scoring. Let's not have, exciting games. So, at the number I'm using right now, the 69.5, I'm still even there. My count is almost 3-1 favoring the over. At 69, it was about 2-1 towards the over. So, is 70 the number? I don't know, but we could pop up there and find out soon enough.
Well, and as far as the prop stuff goes, again, obviously we'll be able to talk a lot more about it for the Super Bowl here, but I want to ask you, I want you to put your handicapper hat on for a minute. What do you sort of see from this game? What is your thought on it? How do you sort of anticipate the game flow? Do you expect a higher scoring game, a lower scoring game? What does Brent think about the outcome here?
Well, I mean, you touched on it right there. I mean, game flow is the key. I mean, you look at, last week, I guess Minnesota is a good example in terms of just, adjustments and stuff like that New Orleans just didn't seem to make, kind of kept Minnesota in the game until the end. Now, whether teams will be passing a lot or running a lot boils down a whole lot to game flow. You look at, Baltimore and Tennessee, that could be a back and forth game. If either of those teams get out, ahead comfortably, you're going to see a heavy run attack. So kind of, trying to predict the game flow is a very difficult thing to do. I think what we're going to get is just a ton of action, obviously, on the 2 quarterback props. My feeling would be a lean towards the over. I think it's going to be that kind of a game.
All right, so let's move over to the NFL side of things here. Talk about the 4 divisional round matchups beginning Saturday afternoon. Game 301, 302, Minnesota and San Francisco. 7 painted pretty much across the market here. We did have some 6.5s early in the week. Those are gone. And the total, by and large, 44.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that 6.5 money is gone is because sharp money grabbed it as well. That was sharp money on San Francisco minus 6.5. And it kind of helps us in terms of, when you see a team like Minnesota get the big upset as they did, that line opened New Orleans minus 8, close, 7.5 dog juice or minus 7, minus 15. So, it took a dramatic drop down to the key number of minus 7. And of course, Minnesota getting the late win for us. But that was obviously a really big result. And that kind of, people look at that game, it's like, well, if Minnesota could hang with New Orleans, then they should be able to do it with San Francisco. Now, obviously, if you look at the odds to win the Super Bowl and such, there was a big difference between San Francisco and New Orleans at that time, even though the records were both 13-3. So, it is interesting as well when you look at this number. Like the opening number of Saints was minus 8 at home, and now you got San Francisco opening up basically minus 6.5 also at home, which is kind of, and I think that's what if you want to look at the overreaction to the Minnesota win, that's kind of like, an indicator right there. It's like if the Saints open 8, how do you have San Francisco opening up at 6.5? And the sharps grabbed that 6.5. I'm at 7 right now. There are some 7 minus 115s out there. I just, my feeling is this number is going to creep up. We'll probably end up being 7 minus 15, 7 minus 120. A 7.5 wouldn't shock me at all. So this is one of those cases where the Minnesota upset is a favorable result for us. My wager count right now in this game is almost dead even, which is great for us. I do see this number hanging around 7, maybe even creeping up. Though I just think San Francisco obviously already got the action from the sharp side. Even though the fact that we're balanced right now, I think it's going to continue to trend up. And matchup wise, it's very difficult to compare team for team in terms of like the speed that San Francisco has both on offensively and defensively, the receivers that they have. No knock about Drew Brees as well, but kind of one of the things with him is he's not a guy who goes deep a whole lot. Jimmy G will definitely go deep. He's got Samuels, he's got Sanders, he's got arguably the best tight end in the league, and they got running backs who are both solid running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield. So it's really difficult to stop that team. That being said, I've got under money as well, which came in at sharp at under 45.5. So both the side and the total of this game are sharp. San Francisco minus 6.5 on the side. The under 45.5 is where the sharp money came in. I'm sitting at 44 as well. And again, talk about the handicapping and kind of a narrative and all that kind of stuff with these games. You're talking about Minnesota does have to travel. They didn't have the bye last week like San Francisco did. You've got stuff talk about Diggs. He's like not feeling well. He's sick under the weather. Thielen's always knocked up, and of course the quarterback situation there. I mean, he's kind of no one really believes in that quarterback quite yet with Minnesota. I think so. I think I really think. Just personally, that the Niners are the right side. Their defensive front seven is the fastest in the NFL, and one of the advantages with that is they actually don't have to blitz to get pressure on the quarterback. So Cousins in the pocket under pressure, I think, is going to be very interesting and very telling how he handles that.
Well, and I think something else that's really interesting about this game and about the sharp action that, as you mentioned, was on San Francisco minus 6.5. If you remember back in early December, San Francisco at New Orleans. That line opened New Orleans in the 3 with juice, 3.5 range, got bet all the way down to 1 or 2 out there in the marketplace. So San Francisco took money in that game against New Orleans. Now San Francisco opens a smaller favorite against Minnesota than New Orleans did. That's kind of what you're talking about in terms of maybe looking for something of an overreaction to what we saw last week.
Yeah, and like I said, in this case, I mean, with the sharp money being on San Francisco and my count being balanced, it kind of, definitely goes in our favor that people are following that narrative. And I get it. I mean, it's easy to look at and say, well, if they can hang with them, then they can hang with them. The other thing, too, I mean, we all know that Minnesota plays on a fast surface indoors. They went to New Orleans where they were playing on a fast surface indoors. Now they're going outdoors on a much slower surface. And, that definitely, I think, will have an effect on the game as well. I think it's going to slow down the running game as well. And I think, I just personally, I think Minnesota is going to have a whole lot of problems. The bye, of course, is very favorable for the Niners. And look at how they closed the season. I mean, they played Green Bay at Baltimore, the New Orleans game that you mentioned. They lost to an Atlanta team that closed the season 4-0 and 6-2 in the second half. They beat the Rams and they won at Seattle. I mean, that was just like the top of the top in terms of competition. I mean, they had a real, high strength of schedule, still finished out real strong.
Now, as you mentioned last week, Minnesota with that win, pretty good for the house. It knocked out all the teasers that had New Orleans in it, which was something that you probably desperately needed, being able to get New Orleans down to -2, -2.5. Another outcome that was pretty good for the books last week, Tennessee over New England. And the Titans here in game 303, 304, getting 9.5 or 10 out there in the market against Baltimore. Tennessee, though, very good to you last week. What do you think this one's going to look like?
Yeah, again, this is another case where, this number is kind of, if Tennessee didn't beat New England, just the same, just let's say it was a normal game, regular season game, this number I believe would be higher. I think it's going to hang around 10 right now. It's 9.5 in juice, or like say 10 dog 15 out there. I think it's going to be a solid 10. I expect Tennessee money to come at plus 10. I still think Baltimore is kind of like the sharper side, and obviously we're not going to have any trouble getting money on Baltimore. Even now, right where we are at the 9.5 and the 10 with juice, still almost dead even in terms of my count. So I got 2 games now back to back where my wager count is very, very solid. At 9.5, it even just slightly favors Tennessee. So that's kind of good for us. I think at 10, Tennessee money will still come. We basically open the same where we are right now. The total did open 47. We're at 48. I think that might continue to tick up. Also, the spread itself was 10-20 or 9.5 minus 115. It's basically held, where it is right now. So, Baltimore, I really don't have to tell you much about Baltimore having won 12 straight games and stuff like that. They, have the bye as well. Again, same thing with the, talking about the defensive front sevens. I think, you look at Tennessee and it's an easy sell in terms of the running game they have, and Tannehill doesn't have to do a whole lot. The thinking as well in terms of backing Tennessee as well, if they beat the Patriots, they can certainly hang with Baltimore within double digits, you would think. But again, Baltimore's front seven is just so much bigger and better than the Patriots. I think that's going to be a real factor in this game. And again, if Baltimore gets right ahead, out ahead and can pound the ball, you're talking about how the gameplay might go. That's going to be a big issue. You got Lamar running the ball, you got Ingram running the ball, you got solid tight ends that they go to as well, and still. We talked about last week how Tennessee heading into that game with the Patriots had the worst secondary in the playoffs, and they've basically had bad results versus an easy schedule. And I think it's going to be a problem for them as well. I'm not predicting a blowout, but I am predicting this number goes to a solid 10 or higher.
What about the total? I mean, I was a little bit surprised to see kind of that initial move on the under. What do you think happens with the total as the game gets here?
Yeah, I think this number hit 46.5, and I didn't happen in-house, but I'm thinking it was sharp money or maybe pseudo-sharp money, just influential money that came back the other way. My feeling is this number ticks back up. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this went back up to 47.5. Looking at my chart right now, I'm pretty much even. I do have slightly more bets towards the under, but I think, the over. This game, is one of those games where I think could get high. I think this number is going to go up just basically on the total. It kind of hit its bottom at 46.5 and started creeping back up right now. Going back to Tennessee though as well. Look at Tannehill, what he did last week. I mean, I think he was like 75 yards he threw for on eight completions or something like that. So it's like they won with really, really bad numbers, and you just can't do that versus the Ravens.
All right, so as we mentioned here on Saturday, sharp money on San Francisco and the under. We transition over to Sunday here. Game 305, 306 is Houston and Kansas City. We got sharp money in the early game here once again.
Yeah, got sharp money on a solid favorite here with Kansas City at home. It's one of those cases where, again, Houston got the win, and Houston's got brand name players that you can kind of sell to the betting public and such. But that just didn't work out for us in terms of the opening number. You see, in-house we opened at -8. We're sitting at 9.5 right now, so it's a 1.5 move is really quite substantial. Sharp money came in there. On Kansas City, of course, moving that one. Again, the bye obviously is an advantage for them. We talked as well about Kansas City's defense has been much better than it was earlier in the season. They closed the season having won 6 straight games. These two did play earlier in the season, and Houston won that game, so that kind of one of those factors that you think people might keep in mind. I think Houston won the second quarter of that game like 20-0 and went on to win that game by 7. But right now my count is just slightly favoring Kansas City. Slight count towards the total, but going over, but just very slightly. So I've got sharp money and a bet count going Kansas City's way. Again, this number 2, I think the stopping point on this 9.5 is probably going to get to 10, where it's going to hold there. I don't see it going above 10, but I could certainly see it reaching 10.
Are you surprised that you're only slightly higher on Kansas City, or is that maybe an indication of just how little money has come in on this game here so far?
No, it just it's just more of an indication as Texans, for whatever reason, I guess with Watson the quarterback and stuff like that, they still have they're still kind of like a brand name. The dynamic plays that he made on the weekend as well kind of stick in people's minds. And again, you're talking about a Kansas City team who maybe wasn't as impressive earlier in the season, as they they closed quite well, and there's kind of the perception that even carries back to last season where they weren't very strong defensively, even though that might not be true now. You kind of still have that perception that lays with people. And I think, if going back, if I could say, like, if I could reopen this game, yeah, I'd obviously go higher, but I don't think, I don't think 8 was really necessarily a bad opening number on this game.
All right, one more game to talk about here in the NFL playoffs for the divisional round. And this one I would say is clear as mud. Game 307, 308, Seattle and Green Bay. Does seem like at this point in time, though, Green Bay getting more of the respected money as this number is starting to creep up.
Yeah, no, this game, I mean, you're right on. It was just clear as mud. And you can kind of go back to the game last week as well with Seattle and Philadelphia. When we did the show, I believe Seattle was like a minus 1.5 point favorite. I talked about how, if Ertz and Sanders were both going to go for Philadelphia, I could see it dropping back down to maybe a pick 'em. And it ended up basically being a pick 'em, or I know some books had even Philadelphia -1. Now, again, with Sanders and Ertz did play, and then, of course, Wentz basically gave them a quarter, and that was nothing else. So that was not a good result for us. The public was still all over the Seahawks in that game, and they've kind of been a public side for all of the season. This count as well in this game, same thing. I've got a whole lot of action going Seattle's way. Count about 2-1 their way, but it's mostly public action that I see going that way. It's just kind of the perception of Green Bay being kind of like a false 13-3, which is kind of strange in that they closed the season winning 5 straight, and they're coming off a bye. They're 7-1 at home. I mean, how do you kind of kick them down? But it's just kind of like the receivers kind of aren't what they used to be. The running game's maybe not what it used to be. With Jones is doing a decent job though. But I don't know. It's just kind of the perception out in the market on Green Bay, I think, is down. It's kind of like they're selling on Green Bay, and they've been buying Seattle all season long. So I think that's kind of what kept this number around where it is. The opener of 4, went up to 4 -115, went down to 4 dog 15, back to 4. I think some 3.5 -15s even popped out there. I mean, at 4 was pretty good two-way action. Now the whole market basically went up to 4.5. So there's a couple of 4 -15s out there, but everyone else is pretty much 4.5 and holding strong there. So me in-house, I mean, I've got even at 4. I had a wager count of about 3-1 favoring Seattle. I did get some, basically an even count at 3.5, and even at 4.5, it's coming Seattle's way. So, my tendency is probably to hang around 4 -115, even though there are some 4.5s out there. But there are, like I said, some 4 -15s as well. So this just, as you said, it's just clear as mud. This number just keeps getting beat back and forth between the 4 and 4.5. Heavy resistance on both sides at 4. But again, some of the the bigger places out there have gone to 4.5. So I'm guessing there was sharp money that way, and I'm also guessing that public money has gone the other way with Seattle, like it is here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, if this looks like some sort of dueling sharp money back and forth, or if this feels like something that's kind of formulating into a sharp versus public split. But again, like you said, a lot of people out there in the community don't like Green Bay very much, and that includes sharp bettors. So this one's tough because I think both of these teams are kind of fade teams that you want to look to play against.
Yeah, I mean, look at Seattle again. We talked about it last week about what they've done with their running game. I mean, it's just like they're I don't know, they're like 4th and 5th string that the guys that they've got in there now, and guys who were sitting on the sideline and watching games a few weeks ago. So it's it's kind of remarkable what they've done in terms of getting to this where they are. Credit to Wilson, credit to their coaching staff as well, I guess. They are getting healthier on defense. We saw last week, I mean, Clowney he caused a whole lot of trouble in that game. So it's going to be interesting here. I think from what I've seen in house, I think the best number for me to balance going two ways is probably going to be 4 with 4 -115. I don't see this number getting higher than 4.5 where it is right now. I could definitely see the market kind of trend back down. Again, I think if the sharps have spoken, they have already on Green Bay, and the public, like I said, is going Seattle's way, and I don't see that changing. And it's funny too, like when you look at Seattle, there's always that perception that we've had over the years about the 12th man and how strong they are at home and such. And obviously they won last weekend on the road in a playoff game. They were 7-1 during the regular season on the road as well. So people can kind of buy into those narratives as well, but and kind of push aside the fact that Green Bay was also 7-1 at home. But you would say, okay, yeah, well, they're supposed to win at home.
Now, look, I'm as sharp as the eraser end of a pencil, and I will admit I've scratched a bald spot into my head with the movement that's happened on this total, because I, for the life of me, cannot figure out why it has gone up. I mean, can you shed some light on that?
No. How's that for a short answer?
I mean, is it like a head fake? Is it sort of a setup to try and get, 47 later in the week with, questionable weather? Is that sort of what this is?
My wager count on this game is about 3-1 towards the under. So when I say no, I can't shed any light into it, that's the reason why. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting under money and the number's going up.
So sharp versus public split on the total then?
I can't say that because I don't have sharp money on the over here. I do see 47s out there and like 47 under -115. My feelings this number creeps back down, but yeah, I can't see it going above 47 where it is right now.
It's just, I mean, again, we analyze this industry week after week after week, and sometimes there are some things that just wind up being head scratchers. And generally, if it's something I can't figure out, but it's a sharper position in nature, I'm not going to butt heads with it. But man, that's a real interesting one, particularly again when you talk about January in Green Bay at Lambeau Field. I mean, it's going to be cold. It's not going to be a whole lot of fun to throw the football. I'm really surprised by that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, I honestly don't know. I was going to say it could be no, because the defense of Seattle's been strong. Green Bay's been decent. And again, you talk about like the running games. Yeah, Green Bay's been probably stronger than Seattle. Seattle was strong throughout the season when they had both, Carson and Penny there. But obviously those guys are gone. So, yeah, it's an interesting kind of look there in terms of why this number's gone up, and especially when looking at my wager count. And sometimes, we just don't have the answer to everything. We watch how the game gets played.
Well, and also, too, here, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's that far away for these games. The Saturday games to be, 2 days away since we're recording Thursday night. The Sunday games to be 3 days away. But, man, in this business, that's an eternity for a lot of money to come in on the game.
Yeah, and the thing, too, I mean, it's not exactly your Sunday night ESPN, game, but this is basically going to be, the last game of the week. Seattle Green Bay, so it's obviously going to have a ton of action. You're going to get a whole lot of public influence on the number as well.
Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook, always helping us out here with the odds report. Brent, always a treat, man. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate you having me on.